The global energy market was shocked when China abruptly stopped importing $2.4 billion worth of LNG annually from the U.S. Australia has been selected as a substitute in China's plan to reorganize its influence throughout the world. China abruptly declared in March 2025 that all LNG imports from the U.S. would be suspended. As the largest LNG exporter in the world in 2024 with over 91 million tons produced, the U.S. unexpectedly lost access to its second-largest market when it imposed a 10% tariff on Chinese goods just 1 month earlier. This move is perceived as direct retaliation. Following the announcement, China promptly redirected its LNG shipments to Europe in order to avoid U.S. tariffs and increase its market share in a market that is desperately looking for energy alternatives to Russian supplies. The U.S. was eliminated from the competition, and Europe was chosen as the new location for China's LNG shipments. In order to benefit from the cheaper LNG from Asia, nations like Germany, the Netherlands, and Italy quickly modify their import regulations. Europe welcomes the redirected LNG flow, while the U.S. can only watch as money goes to other hands. The EU government swiftly starts storage projects, increases investment in energy transfer systems, and expands seaport infrastructure within the bloc, with urgent energy needs in the wake of the Russia-Ukraine crisis. As a consequence, the U.S. loses partners, market share, and negotiating leverage in Europe, a market that was essential to its post-COVID and post-energy crisis strategy. A $1.5 billion deal is quietly signed by Australia with China Resources Gas, one of China's biggest energy conglomerates, while the U.S. market is in shock. Beginning in 2027, this 15-year agreement will provide 600,000 tons of LNG annually. Due to its closer proximity to China, Australia's LNG is not only 20% less expensive than American gas, but it also takes 10 days to transport. The Woodside contract is a geopolitical statement in addition to being a commercial success. Australia, a longtime U.S. ally, is currently China's top energy partner. As the world's second-largest economy and home to 1.4 billion people, China has enormous energy needs, making LNG the cornerstone of its national energy strategy. Beijing started lowering its reliance on the U.S. after tariffs were placed on Chinese goods in 2019. By 2024, only 5.4% of its imports were LNG from the U.S., a significant decrease from the previous nearly 20%. Rather, China has taken the initiative to sign long-term agreements with Qatar, Russia, and Central Asia. It has also strengthened strategic cooperation with Australia in LNG and critical minerals, and it has invested in the East Asia gas pipeline from Russia, which is expected to operate in 2027. All of this is done to preserve energy independence and prevent dependence on one partner, especially in light of the ongoing trade disputes. Before China banned imports, the U.S. made $2.4 billion a year, exporting roughly 400,000 tons of LNG to China. Nevertheless, U.S. LNG export terminals are left with mountains of unsold inventory following the suspension. Contracts are terminated, and shipping expenses increase dramatically. Australia, which had previously lagged behind the U.S. in terms of LNG market share, takes advantage of the chance to overtake the U.S. and emerge as China's and many other Asian economies' top LNG option. The global energy market has entered a new era where price and geopolitical strategy will be the deciding factors, and the U.S. LNG industry faces the risk of restructuring as a result of this shock to the billion-dollar market. Trade tensions increase when the Trump administration imposes a 20% tariff on Chinese goods in February 2025. In a fierce retaliation, China reduces U.S. imports while fortifying its trade relations with the EU and Canada. As a result, Canada and Europe cap while American farmers and businesses lose a multi-billion-dollar market. Was this part of a larger strategy or a strategic blunder on the part of the United States? For many years, the U.S. was China's main supplier of natural gas and crude oil, but Canadian oil has been taking its place. However, Ottawa found a new buyer in Beijing in March 2025 after Washington imposed a 10% tariff on Canadian oil imports. Oil imports from Canada were immediately increased by China, mostly via the Trans Mountain Expansion (TMX) pipeline. A direct, affordable route to Asia was made possible by this infrastructure upgrade, which increased capacity from 300,000 barrels per day to 890,000 barrels per day. Since China now receives 50% of Canada's crude oil exports, Beijing is becoming less dependent on the U.S. for its long-term energy needs. Beijing's new supplier is LNG Canada. It's more than just liquefied natural gas and oil. Another industry where Canada is filling the gap is LNG. one of the biggest LNG export facilities in North America, the LNG Canada project, is scheduled to begin operations in 2025 and has an annual export capacity of 14.26 million tons. Prior to Washington's trade restrictions, the U.S. was one of China's biggest suppliers of LNG. However, in an effort to diversify its energy sources, China turned to Canada, Qatar, and Australia. As a result, Canada is progressively displacing the U.S. as China's strategic energy partner. We import less agricultural products from China. Since 2023, China, one of the biggest consumers of agricultural products worldwide, has drastically reduced U.S. imports. The most affected industries are soybeans, where the U.S. provided 40% of China's imports in 2016. By 2024, that number will have dropped to 18%. Meanwhile, Brazil and Argentina now make up 74% of China's imports of soybeans, while the U.S. used to be a major supplier of wheat, corn, and cotton, but these crops are now being replaced by South American and European suppliers, such as Spain and the Netherlands. The new kings of pork. Additionally, China has greatly increased its imports of meat from Europe, especially from the Netherlands and Spain. In 2023 alone, EU pork exports to China increased by 35%, while U.S. pork exports fell because of tariffs and more stringent Chinese inspection procedures for American farmers. This shift is a nightmare because it is accompanied by stronger food safety regulations, more stable supply chains, and competitive pricing compared to U.S. exports. Overproduction, falling prices, and diminishing profits are the results of losing China's enormous demand. China's decision to stop purchasing U.S. agricultural products is hurting American farmers. Due to oversupply and price declines, American farmers are experiencing declining profits, financial strain, and even bankruptcy. Because they lack the resources to make a quick change, smaller farms are most vulnerable. A vital market is lost by U.S. industry. It's more than just farming. The industrial sector in America is also suffering. China is reducing its U.S. investment. Chinese market share is being lost by tech behemoths like Google, Tesla, and Intel. China is gradually losing its influence in the world as a result of its alliances with Canada, Europe, and the BRICS countries. Global trade is changing as a result of this trade war. The EU and Canada are winning. The lost U.S. trade is worth billions of dollars. The United States is slipping. American industries, tech firms, and farmers are feeling the pinch. The crucial query: is this the start of a long-term loss of U.S. economic dominance, or will the U.S. change tactics to make up lost ground? Washington runs the risk of further cutting off American companies from international supply chains if it increases tariffs. Beijing's aggressive trade diversification, meanwhile, is forging new partnerships that have the potential to permanently alter the balance of power in the world economy. It will be more difficult for the U.S. to regain its lost influence the longer this standoff continues. While politics and the economy are in disarray, billions of dollars are being invested in F-47 fighter jets. What's happening? Trump announces the F-47 aircraft. The president recently announced the creation of the F-47 jet, which will replace the F-35 at a press conference.
That's the real issues facing the American people, the struggles that the American people are facing. We find ourselves wasting endless amounts of time discussing Trump's absurdities.
In an effort to position the U.S. as the leader in military technology, this is a component of a larger plan to increase military might. However, the public is concerned about this project's cost. While millions of Americans suffer from social well-being budget cuts, the United States currently spends an astounding $800 billion annually on defense. Programs that are fair, the F-47 U.S.-Canada relations, and the Conquest Statement, which the president recently sparked controversy by calling the U.S.-Canada border an artificial divide and even expressing a desire for Canada to become a state of the U.S., have made many wonder if military projects are really worth the cost when civilian lives are not being prioritized. Additionally, with wars and international tensions still raging, can the U.S. maintain a strong economy while moving forward with defense projects like these? However, given that Canada is a significant trading partner of the United States, with bilateral trade exceeding $600 billion annually, is this strategy really feasible in the current environment? Furthermore, Canada maintains an independent foreign policy and is a major player in international agreements. Will there be significant tensions in the area, or could this push for conquest result in a good relationship between the two countries? In any case, Canada's response to these remarks has been very clear. it has expanded defense cooperation with Australia and European nations. To protect its strategic interests in the area, Canada is also concentrating on fortifying ties with other allies, such as South Korea and Japan.